Villages, actually.
All right, you should be seeing a countdown.
Welcome, everybody, to 914 Wired, a podcast taking place in 3 locations today. We're in the studio of Charlie Stern, and working in our Southwest Yonkers Bureau, as always, is Ardina Seward. How are you guys doing today?
I'm holding it together as usual, Peter.
Doing more than holding it together, Lou. And how about you, Ardina?
I'm doing great. I'm excited because I tell you, this is probably the first time that Lou Young and I are on the same side of a camera. For people who didn't know, Lou and I worked together, fought together, shook hands together, embraced together at Eyewitness News for many years. And I was his photographer, and Lou was a fantastic reporter. And
That's interesting.
Then he went on.
And then he abandoned ABC and went to a real television news station. Yes.
So I want to get this straight. So at ABC, there were days when Ardina, you were the camera operator for Lou Young.
Yes.
Wow.
And Lou was I don't want to dedicate the whole show to Lou being a reporter, but just for background, is that he was one of those reporters who I loved working with because there was no pretension. Lou just told it what it was. What you saw was what you got. He didn't try and mince words. He didn't try and fancy himself up. He was raw, authentic, and that's what made him a great reporter.
And then he never made any of his broadcasts about himself like some of the other wackos that Channel 7 did. They made the stories all about them. Lou just covered news. Lou, but now you are
Is this like my funeral? What is this?
No. I'm switching gears entirely. I just want to throw a little plaudit out there, and then I'm going right to the actual show.
It's a transition.
Lou is a village trustee for the village of Mamaroneck, which is part of the town of Mamaroneck. And Mamaroneck, as I'm guessing most of our listeners know, whenever there's heavy rains in Westchester County, Mamaroneck usually gets, if not the worst, among the worst. And once again, the storm from a week and a half ago inundated Mamaroneck, and Mamaroneck is prone to flooding. So can you give us, first, I have some questions, but can you give us an update on the state of the homes that were inundated with water, how they're all doing now, especially that woman who lost her home?
I'll tell you this. Mamaroneck is prone to flooding, but it is less prone than it has been in the past. We have been doing flood mitigation, and mitigation is difficult to see because it's something that doesn't happen. In other words, you get a flood, it could have been worse, therefore it was mitigated. And we are working in the rivers. We are at a place in Mamaroneck where 2 rivers, the Mamaroneck River and the Sheldrick River, converge. And that's where the historic flooding has happened. We had tremendous flooding 2 years ago after Ida, and we had flooding a couple of weeks ago. We had some scary moments just a couple of days ago. But the rivers are cleaner than they've been in that we've dredged sections, problematic sections. We've removed dozens and dozens of truckloads of debris, and the rivers move. They drain.
Now, I'm aware that the Army Corps of Engineers
yes
has created a fund, $17 million plus.
Oh no, Let me. It's $100 million.
What happened to this? What happened to that earlier amount?
It always was at least 82, but they keep adjusting it upwards for inflation. When we received funding 2 years ago, it was at 88, and now we figure it'll probably come in at 100 million. A lot of this is this was approved to be an Army Corps flood mitigation plan, which is major surgery on the rivers to widen them, divert them in some places, to give them places to overflow, to straighten the flow to the harbor.
The basic question here: what river is running through the village of Mamaroneck?
He just said it. Mamaroneck and the Sheldrick.
Mamaroneck and the Sheldrick rivers. Thank you.
So that's the key to what we're doing here, and that really, even though the Army Corps is here in town and they're drawing and they're preparing to take down some bridges and do some other things, they really haven't started yet. And when they get rolling later this year, and let's say 2 or 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when it's finally finished, the flood threat will be vastly mitigated.
Okay, but here's my other question, and then I'm going to turn it over to these guys. The Army Corps has worked on the Sawmill River for decades, and it still floods an awful lot. They've devoted many millions of dollars on the Bronx River, and that floods all the time. And the lower part of the Hutchinson River, or the Parkway is, also still floods an awful lot. So my question to you is, are you satisfied with what the Army Corps of Engineers is doing, or are they not as good as we all thought they were?
Oh, well, there's two different things there, Peter. One is that those three rivers you mentioned, in our vast wisdom many years ago, we decided to run highways along the side of them because, well, the river's right there and it's easy to run next to it.
Yeah, Ken Jenkins made the same comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while that made sense in land acquisition to build the highway, made it easier to do, it meant it's going to flood. It's next to a river. I mean, so the Army Corps isn't going to keep the river from ever flooding, and there's nothing you can do to protect a flat surface running next to a river. So I don't think it's the same thing as mitigating the depth of flooding in a community that's near a river. So that's the situation we have here, and our expectation is that we will be able to reduce the flooding in Mamaroneck to more of an annoyance, more of
An acceptable level of
an
aggravation.
acceptable annoyance rather than an existential threat, which is what it has been. Because after Ida, the water was 14 feet deep at the confluence, and that's that'll inundate the first floor of a home. And so what we're hoping to do is to do two things: is to mitigate the depth of the water, and at the same time, as we rebuild in the floodplain and around, to make sure that homes are built up, and that the properties have flood mitigation features to them, like dry wells and bioswales and blue roof retention, that sort of thing. And as we do all of that at the same time with the Army Corps, with our parallel flood mitigation, with that developmental building code process that will make these new structures less prone to contribute to floods and hold some of the water. That all that together, including working with upstate communities to minimize the amount of runoff coming into the rivers, all of that can work to maybe arrest this problem, minimize it, certainly mitigate it, and take the worst fears off the table there. Because what we have now is we're just playing Russian roulette. If it rains a lot, we're going to get flooded. So
Ardina.
What's been done or what's being done, Lou, to prevent debris in the river? And the reason why I ask is, I grew up on 2nd Street, so I know that area really well. And I've talked about it before when it floods. The river at that time was pristine. We used to fish in that river. Went back some years ago and I saw debris in the water. I saw shopping carts in the water. It was like, what the blank happened.
I would submit to you, Ardina, that river hasn't been pristine since people first moved here. They built dams, they moved it, they channelized it. It doesn't resemble anything like a natural river. I'm sure it was nicer when we were younger, but it still got those stone sides, and in many places it looks like a canal. And the debris that comes down river comes down, the water carries it down. So we have to maintain the rivers. And what we found about 18 months ago was that the village has a budget line to maintain the rivers, and we didn't do it. We didn't do it because when it's not raining and it's not flooding, who wants to go in the river and pull stuff out of it? So
How much was the budget line for?
Well, the budget line had $35 or $50,000 in it when I found it when I first was
So
appointed.
well, I would question whether it would have made any difference
Not
over
that kind of
over
money.
the arc of time.
Well, that's what people said, and I convinced the village manager to declare a flood storm emergency because this was after Ida, and we put a lot of money in there, and we started pulling stuff out. So we've been pulling stuff out of the river for a little over a year now. Dozens of trucks.
I'm afraid to ask what's coming out of there.
Well, tree trunks, shopping carts, rubber floatables.
Oh my God!
Anything
Anything valuable?
But not Jimmy Hoffa.
everything. And now we've also secured permits from the Department of Environmental Protection, the DEC, Environmental Conservation, state, that we're allowed to dredge now, and we're dredging, taking silt, making the river deeper and a little wider in places, and taking.
But I know that's what they did in the sawmill, and I'm when I was bringing up those other river projects, I just remember that they dredged these other waterways, and it may have made a little bit of a difference, but they silt up again anyway.
Oh yeah, well you have to do it. I mean, this has never been done. So we're probably going to spend $1 million, $1.3 million, $1.5 million in the next year and a half of our money, the village money, to dredge where the Army Corps isn't going to be.
Now, the Army Corps announced in May that they were giving another. That's where I got the $17 million figure from. $17.5 million from the state and the Army Corps of Engineers for flood mitigation. That's where I got that number from.
Well,
I didn't make it up out of thin air.
Yeah, some of that was originally the formula was $88 million, and then I think $17 million was the county part, and then the village was going to pay $8 million. The Biden administration and God bless Senator Chuck Schumer, they came up with another money that the village doesn't have to put up a dime for the federal project, which means now that we can use some of that money to do other things, which is what I've been pushing. So whereas spending $1 million would have been is always a big deal, but would have been a really big deal a couple of years ago. We kind of got an $8 million gift, so we can be a little bit proactive in what we do in addition to this parallel flood mitigation. In other words, we're trying to do everything yesterday to take care of a problem that's got a lot of causes. There's no one silver bullet, and we're just attacking it. And I think it's working. I really do.
Let's talk about money. There was an incident, and you have more particulars than I do about theft from the Mamaroneck Library.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different from flooding. But go ahead. All right.
Okay, it's different from flooding.
We're going to get back to flooding after.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that at one point there was speculation that the library might have to close. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that were taken from the library. So the question is, would you have to, number one, what's the status of that? And would money from the flood fund have to be reallocated to keep the library working?
Short answer, no. We have no higher priority than flooding, all right, as far as I'm concerned. But keep in mind, the library is a separate government. The library is not a village department. It has its own elected board of library board, and it has its own budget, which it puts before the voters on an election in December. Now it's a December election. It's only the library up. A couple of hundred people vote. It's one of these problems that I have with these off-year elections, and we can get into that later. But it is its own government. It does it. All that is true, and it let bonds a while back for that beautiful new library. It's a great library. There's no doubt about it. It's the best library in Westchester. Period. End of paragraph. But what happened was they had a business manager who was accused of playing fast and loose with some of the finances. It's not alleged that hundreds of thousands of dollars were taken. It's tens of thousands of dollars that may have been taken. All right, that's a possible criminal act, and that's an investigation that's happening. That person has been let go, and that matter is going to be handled by the courts and the law enforcement. But in the process of dealing with that, they found that the business manager had been misleading them for many years about how much money they had in the bank, and this
Right.
was sort of a layman's mistake that they made when they had the library built and they had the bond issue given to them. They had, let's say, they had $17 million approved, and let's say, and I'm only guessing at these numbers. These numbers are approximate. And,
Got it.
that the building only cost 15 million. Well, they thought they had the other 2 million still in the bank, and that's not how it works. If you get a bond and you don't use it all, you don't get the money anyway.
It goes back to the general fund, right?
Yeah. So for many years they were not raising taxes sufficiently to do everything they wanted to do. And because they always said, we got that money in the bank. We don't need to worry about it. We got that big. So when it came down now the rubber was about to meet the road, and they're budgeting with the assumption that they've got this extra money, and when they go to look at it, it's not there because the business manager told them it was there and it wasn't there. That's what they say.
So wouldn't that create a situation where
Horrendous.
voters no, let me finish. Where voters might want to put some element, at least a budgetary part of the library, under village control, or at least that the village has some kind of oversight?
We did that, and I had to play the bad cop with this. So this is because nobody wanted to close the library. It's a great library, all right.
Yeah.
But they came to us and we issued tax anticipation notes. In other words, when they collect, they're able to levy taxes, but we collect the taxes for them and we give them the money. That's because we're able to do that legally. We issued a tax anticipation note for them, essentially a loan from the banks, using their expected tax revenues as collateral, and we held it. And I said, I don't think you guys are taking this seriously enough. I want some demonstration of what you're doing. And they had meetings with our clerk treasurer and our village manager to prove to us that they're doing all the things they need to do to get the library back on track. And then we released the money to them. And now we just recently approved the fact that we're going to pay back the TAN for them, and they're going to pay us in installments. So we have we have what we think we have them assurances from them that they're under control. So we have done exactly what Peter is suggesting there. You've
driven some additional financial
yes.
accountability into
And
a system that you don't directly control.
I had to be the bad guy. Everybody said, "You said we're not taking it seriously. How dare you?" and all this stuff.
But the bottom line, Lou, is none of that money's coming out of the flood mitigation fund. Am I correct in saying that?
No linkage. No linkage to flood mitigation.
And listen, and if the library folded, if they went belly up, if their budget gets turned down, if they can't keep it open, we're going to end up with it anyway. So then it's going to be then it will be competing with the flood mitigation. But as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing more important than flood mitigation, because that is an existential threat to as a part of the community. So
Lou,
yeah,
I want to talk more about flood mitigation and broaden the subject, because this is all over Westchester. There's flooding problems all over the place. I have friends in New Rochelle. They have flooding problems. There's this pocket of Pelham that's, I guess you would say, south of Glenwood Lake, and it's at the bottom of a hill within Pelham, and it's at the vortex of two different water bodies or water sources, and these people have like chronic problems with basement flooding and driveway flooding, and it's going on all over Westchester County. There's another pocket.
Is that in the manor, that part?
No, that's Village of Pelham.
Okay.
It's not too far from where you're thinking of.
that's stormwater management is what you're talking about.
Some of it is stormwater, but some of it is overflow from a lake. And when we get these massive storms, the lake is overflowing, water is flowing down a hill, and it's coming from two different directions. There's another pocket like that in Mount Vernon. You know that historic church? It's very close to the border of the Bronx and Mount Vernon. There's where the men's shelter used to be located, the Salvation Army. I can't remember the name of the street,
Yeah.
and it might be South Third Avenue. I'm not sure, and it's a river down there when it rains. I mean, I've seen the videos. It's unbelievable. You talk about like 14 feet of water. That's the kind of experience that they're having. The point is, it's all over the place, and we're not getting lightweight storms. We're getting
100-year storms
We're
every
getting
year.
we're getting like 25-year storms every 2 years. We're getting
and what-
3 inches of rain is like not a big deal anymore.
Interestingly, I found out, and I didn't know this, and it was a surprise to me, that you would think a 100-year storm happens once every 100 years, right? No,
Yeah.
that's
Clearly not.
That's not what it ever meant. What it meant was that a 100-year storm means that you have a 1 in 100 chance of the storm happening in any given year. All right, so you can have 3 100-year storms in the same year. I mean, if I mean,
They should change the phrase then.
I know, but
It sounds like
yeah.
it's
semantics.
But it's not.
And here's the thing: a 500-year storm is not necessarily significantly worse than a 100-year storm. It's just a different kind of storm, you know.
Right, right.
like
But
three
if, you're,
cars
but,
on
if, but if your basement has 6 feet of water, you know what it is.
Yep.
And here's another like subtle problem because if you shop for flood insurance, you go to the government website, you will find out the definitions and the floodplain and the flood zone. And I
Right.
know Lou probably knows all about the maps that the government has. And where you live may not be actually in a flood zone, but you could experience flooding. But then
Which
here's
is why people have flood insurance, because people in flood zones can't get
and
them.
flood insurance may or may not help you depending
Right.
upon the source of the water. So this I learned recently. There's something called driving rain, which is what we experience like here every couple of weeks. You get a 2 inches of rain, you got water in your basement. Flood insurance does not help you with that at all.
No.
That's called driving rain. But if there's a flood that occupies your entire street because the Long Island Sound rose up, that's flood. And that would be insured.
Especially if it hit White Plains. That'd be a long time for the water, long distance for the water to travel.
You laugh until the day something like that happens, and then it's like, oh my God. So Lou, what's going on in Mamaroneck? Is it actually flooding? Is it rainwater runoff? What is both?
It's flooding. We have two types of flooding. We have a coastal flooding, and we have a riverine flooding. They call it riverine flooding, which is the rivers overflowing their banks, and a lot of times the riverine flooding manifests itself not in the way you normally would expect, where it comes over the banks and you set up your sandbags and you can stop it. You can't stop it because the drain behind you, the water will come right out of the drain. In other words, the way it starts usually is the water will start coming out from under the manholes and the drains everywhere before the river crests. In other words, the whole thing fills up like a sponge, and then just
What you're saying is the whole entire water level of a river
yeah,
rises.
yeah, and we sit on an aquifer here, so that
What's an aquifer?
is saturated. So
An aquifer is underwater, is underground water.
yeah. So if so the how dry or how wet is the aquifer, or how high is the water in the aquifer, is another potential. There are instances where we can handle 4 and 5 inches of rain. There are instances where 3 inches is going to put us under. So because
By the way, many states in the Midwest and in the Northwest rely on these underground aquifers for their drinking water, and the aquifers are drying up. There's not enough when there's droughts. There's not enough water coming down in the form of rain to refill the aquifers, and that's part of the reasons why
Yeah.
states like Nevada and Utah are in such trouble. It's not just the drought; it's the fact that they're drawing their water from aquifers, and those aquifers take thousands of years to fill up.
and then Long Island gets its water from aquifers, which seems weird, but that's
Well, they're surrounded by seawater, so
So why is this? Why, Lou? From your experience in Mamaroneck, and you've clearly built a body of knowledge around this. Why is this worse than ever?
It's worse than ever because climate change is here, and we have a severe rain events. You have atmospheric rivers, and you have a rain event that'll drop 6, 8 inches of water at a clip. That's not normal. I mean, so we've had in the last few years we've had several of them. So that's just unusual. That's the big threat. I'll give you an example, and to tell you that you don't have to live near you don't have to be near the water. The flooding can happen anywhere. It's more likely in a low-lying area, but it can happen anywhere. After Ida, I was asked by somebody to go out and take some pictures of some flooding that happened at an elementary school in Portchester, Washington Elementary, and I took my little, my iPhone, and I went out there, and I'm going up a hill, and it seemed odd to me, and I pull up to Washington, and I see that it's a nice neighborhood, and they pulling all the stuff out of the basement, and giant TVs and learning boards and whiteboards and all sorts of like equipment that was ruined, and I found the janitor, and I said, well, is there a brook or something around here? He goes, no. I says, well, where'd the water come from? He says, it came out of the sky.
And that's absolutely
here
real.
and then
Look,
left. He goes, so yeah.
Sounds like a real Portchester response.
Yeah.
Portchester's not just near the Sound, though. It's there are two bodies of water. There's
but
the
it was-
Byram River, and in the heights, the water could have come from something called Blind Brook.
Limebrook,
Yeah, but if you know where I'm when you're going down US 1, Peter, and you know where you can either take the left.
I know where GW is. I grew up in Portchester.
Okay, so but it's up. There's a steep hill you got to climb to get up.
There is a hill there. Yes.
It just doesn't seem like a place that would flood. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but
and yes, it can.
But a lot has to do with topography. It has to do with landscaping. If you have a bunch of trees there, if you have something that's going to suck up the water, then you've got a better shot. You've got a better chance.
You're not safe anywhere. And
I think that was Charlie's point, that it doesn't matter where you and Lou's as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are. We're in climate change times, and what has been the case in the past has nothing to do with what's going to happen in the future. There's no predictor.
No.
But I have one other question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've been sharing your opinions as an elected, as a resident and as an elected official. Are your views in line with the other Board of Trustee members, or are yours an outlier compared to theirs?
I think, and I don't want to speak for my other board members, I believe that that the majority of the board agrees with me on this. There is one board member who seems to be more less willing to tackle the flooding problem because you don't want to get people's hopes up, and it's always going to flood, and what can you do, that kind of thing, because it is to accept responsibility for this. It's a big step, but my feeling is that if we don't accept responsibility for it and tackle it, then who does? And the Army, and then the Army Corps comes in here and they go, yeah, well, that's not going to solve it. Well, nothing's going to solve it. You got to do everything. So yeah, that's the whole point. I would say that we have right now we have a 4-to-1 majority that would put flooding at the absolute number one priority. That fifth vote doesn't ignore flooding, but certainly has other priorities.
Is that the person who has sued the village?
No. I don't.
Okay.
It's Trustee Lucas. I mean,
Okay.
she's just less strident about flooding than the rest of
Okay.
them. That's all.
Flood mitigation is got to be a number one issue for every local municipality. Certainly any municipality that's got proximity to the Long Island Sound, which is Pelham and New Rochelle and Mamaroneck, Larchmont, Rye, Harrison,
and Portchester.
in Portchester. And then if you look at other communities, they've got rivers running through them, and then all the way over to the Hudson River where they got another set of issues. and flooding and flood mitigation and rain mitigation. So I think at the local level, there's very few things that rise above. Lou Young, you've reinvented yourself. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a future
Yeah.
meeting with him and ask him what his political future is. Because to me, he sounds like he needs a bigger job than what he's got right now.
No.
I think he's thinking about that.
But
We're not asking him today.
We're not asking today, but I hope you are. I hope you are. Listen, this is 914 Wired on behalf of my co-host, Peter Moses and Ardina Seward. I want to thank you for being our guest, Lou.
Thank you for having me.
And you can catch
Thanks,
this
Lou.
podcast on all the major podcast directories, and it's live streamed on YouTube. You can always play it back there too.
And
Ardina, thanks for providing.
while
me.
you're looking at podcasts, don't forget Tough Times with Lou Young. It's a podcast also.
Tough
Okay.
spelled Tuff or Tough?
No, Tough Times. You're just like the regular Tough Times with Lou Young.
Okay.
All right, look it up. Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Okay.
All right, don't go away, Lou.
All right.